This is America's weirdest theme park and some of the strangest coasters you're ever gonna see, like this one on a building, this Real Life Connects coaster, and this coaster which caused 5 deaths. And I'm gonna ride all of them and more, starting with the world's weirdest coaster, the Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain. It's built into a half-finished fake mountain, the trains are these weird minecart-looking things, and it has the only elevator lift on any wooden coaster in the world. It starts relatively normal, but once we entered the mountain, that's when it got wild. Inside the mountain are absurdly tight tunnels filled with the most wildly tight turns I have ever seen. It was like a wild mouse on steroids, throwing me all around inside the car. And it's not just turns, there's also theming elements and some bizarrely janky drops. Oh, and I also rode the whole thing backwards, which is something you can do apparently.
That is without a doubt the weirdest roller coaster I have ever ridden. I'm like legitimately at a loss for words. Absolutely bizarre.
And it's just the first of many of the weird rides we'll get to ride, like the most cracked out bumper cars I've ever seen, a coaster that goes over top of Kiddie Land, and way more. But first, let's do the paratrooper. This doesn't look like much, it's a kiddie ride, but because it's over the water, it was terrifying. I am deathly afraid of the water, so how this thing swung out over the lake with only a small bar holding me in was petrifying.
Okay, honest to God, I'm legitimately shaking. Why is a kiddie ride the scariest thing I've done in months?
That was scary, but the water swings are even scarier. These swing multiple feet out over the water and only used a tiny bar and a seatbelt to hold me in as I was swung above the water. And that's not all, because to add another layer of insanity, the seats rocked back and forth the whole time, meaning I was pointed down facing the water, though I was distracted from my fear by this guy who was doing jet ski tricks under us the whole time. What other park can some random guy do jet ski wheelies under you while you ride something? After that, I think I was cursed, because every coaster I wanted to ride was closed. Cyclone was closed, Cornball Express was closed, Steel Hog was closed, but thankfully, the park's newest coaster, the All-American Triple Loop, was open. Oh god. I'm not even gonna lie, I was pretty scared walking up to this thing. It's a massive, extremely loud coaster that looks insanely intense, but that's not why I was scared. I was worried because every single part of this coaster has killed someone. The coaster itself used to be named Quimera at a park in Mexico where it derailed, killing 2 people, and the trains come from a coaster named Mindbender at a park in Canada where it derailed, killing 3 people, meaning this coaster is responsible for 5 deaths. So while we were climbing up the lift, I was afraid for my life. As we hit the drop, I was bracing for the worst, genuinely fearing for my life. Thankfully, obviously, I didn't die, but that does not mean it was a good ride. It was brutally intense, with the loops being so powerful I lost vision, and some of the drops being wild and unpredictable. All of that was good fun, or at least it should have been if it wasn't so rough. It was one of the roughest coasters I have ever ridden. Throughout the entire ride, my head was smashing into the rock-hard restraints. I got off with a ripping headache, and I think if I didn't brace for it, I would have gotten off with a legitimate neck injury. It was that rough. After that, Steel Hog was still closed, so I went over to the Hoosier Hurricane. Yes, that's its real name. The station for this coaster is above the main walkway, and the queue for this one was really cool because it went over the log flume, which I actually got to watch fill with water. Apart from the weird station, this was probably the least weird coaster in the park. Other than being mostly over water, it doesn't really do anything all too interesting. It's just a standard coaster that goes out to the edge of the park and then comes back to the station. And other than one moment where it violently jerks to the side, then drops under a bridge, it was also a pretty boring coaster. So let's move on over to the Steel Hog, which is finally open. This thing looks like a Real Life Connects coaster, being absurdly compact and having track going everywhere. And I think it rides weirder than it looks. It starts strong with one of the steepest drops in the world, and then goes into a super fun and frankly bizarre layout of wonky turns, an upside down stall, and this amazing downwards roll.
I really like weird coasters like this, so it was really fun, but it was just completely bizarre. It feels like they wanted to make a Wild Mouse, but they were like, wait a second, no, we can't do that. So they made a Wild Mouse, but like bigger and wackier.
At this point, I was getting pretty hungry, so I went over to grab a snack. And while I do that, I want to take a minute to talk about how weird everything about this park is. It's like a real-life roller coaster tycoon park with everything being jammed into an absurdly tight space. We've already looked at some of the coasters, but the park has a bunch of other weird stuff. It's got a haunted house, some weirdly large fish, fried Oreo shops underneath coaster stations, a half-working arcade featuring one of the loudest bathrooms I've ever used, pinball games, this old-fashioned ball rolling game, and of course the artificial beach that this place is named after. I've never been to a park like this before, and I love it. Though what I don't love is the park's water policy. I have been to tons of theme parks all around the country, and one thing they all have in common is they let me bring in a refillable water bottle. Refillable bottles are banned at this park, and I had to bring in a sealed plastic bottle. But that's not it. They only allow one bottle per person, and I saw people being turned away for bringing in bottles that were too big. Now, this wouldn't be the biggest deal if I could just refill my bottle at a water fountain, except there are no water fountains, so if I run out of water, I'll either have to go back to my car or buy their water bottle, which frankly isn't very big, so I'd probably need to buy more than one. This is the worst policy I have ever seen at any park, and honestly seems incredibly dangerous in the summer months when dehydration is a really big concern. They are putting people at real danger because they want to make a quick buck off water bottle sales. Once I was done devouring a pretzel, I went over to the bumper cars, but these aren't your standard bumper cars. These are the most cracked out, insane bumper cars I have ever ridden.
Oh yeah, it's ham steaming time.
But I did not steam ham. I got my ham steamed.
No! Ah!
It was like being jumped. There wasn't a second of peace while I was being destroyed from every side. I have never ridden bumper cars this insane.
Well, that was less like bumper cars and more like a car crash simulator. Oh my gosh.
After being brutalized by the bumper cars, it was time for the Tiger Coaster. Tiger Coaster? Tigger Coaster? The names at this park are just bizarre. This coaster is literally on top of a building because why not? And is one of the most intense rides at the park. Those turns are insane. It felt like it was trying to kill me. Other than that, it doesn't really do anything. The rest of the ride is just turning around so I can do another insane turn. Though they really didn't have the space to do anything more. I mean, it's built on top of a building. After that, I was finally able to ride the Cornball Express. The names just keep getting weirder. This is the best coaster in the park, and it's not even close. It's filled with moments that threw me out of my seat, which was extra crazy because of the minimal restraints. And there's other funky moments like this helix that slammed me into the side of the train. Oh, and it's casually built on top of the park's Kiddie Land because why not?
That was one of the best wooden coasters I've ever ridden.
That was the last coaster in the park, but we still got two more pretty unique rides to do. The first being the Den of Lost Thieves, the park's shooting ride. This was one of the strangest dark rides I have ever ridden. It starts by climbing to the second level of the building in a pitch black tunnel so tight it felt like I had to duck. After that were some kinda strange but fun scenes with stuff to shoot at. It eventually took me outside and into the creepy dungeon, and after I exploded, the ride was over. It wasn't the greatest shooting ride of all time, but it was way better than one specific Spider-Man ride at a Disney park.
Now, I did just sneeze once, and whenever I sneeze only once, that means rain's coming.
But I think we'll have just enough time for one final ride, the ski lift. This took me all the way across the park, letting me look down and watch the rides and people underneath me. It was a little scary though, because the only thing holding me in was this little bar that I could easily move. So if I wanted to jump in this pool, I totally could have. It felt a little dangerous, especially compared to the other ski lifts I've ridden, like the one over at Disney. Speaking of which, you should watch this video where I have an entire Disney World day for free. Oh, and shout out to We the Coasters. They gave me permission to use their POVs for this video because the park wouldn't let me record on rides. Okay, bye.